Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Wot Supp podcast, episode 41 now, I believe we're up to, Stu. We've managed to crack into a bit of an interesting topic today. Both Stu and I are very passionate about this area. We both, I suppose, as formulators ourselves, have brought products to market and watched the market evolve with supplements around the hormonal space, and particularly test boosters. As a bit of a change of pace, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive today, talk about how the industry's changed, trends we've seen, and have a real fun around looking at how natural testosterone boosters work, what to look for, what not to look for, and generally just talk about trends and how it's evolved over time. So, morning, Stu. Thanks as always for joining, mate.
I'm the same as you, Will. This episode is something that I am excited about, and I know we're going to plan on doing a series of these episodes. So there's plenty of fun to come. Just really lasering in on test boosters today is going to give us a real chance to get in depth on some of this stuff. Yeah. But I think before we really dive into the test boosters themselves, I think it's important for us to give a little bit of a background about why we're interested in this stuff, what our brands do in this kind of area, and how we got so deep into this stuff in the first place. Because it's very easy to start a brand and just come out with a protein and a pre-workout, and that's as far as you ever get. But you being the founder, the director, the owner of Primabolics Nutrition, and the same being true for me with GLA, Growth Labs Australia, I think it's probably interesting to get a start first off by asking you, what drew you to this space, and what is Primabolics doing in this space?
Yeah, certainly, man. I think that's a cracker way to start. And this is where I put a lot of time into seminars and being on the road and talking to store owners and general customers and people on the way, is explain to them that I suppose everything's downstream of hormones. I found the things that they're the biggest levers you can pull. Like when you're looking at trying to give someone meaningful change, whether it's improving mood, stress, sleep, libido, energy, how they build muscle, how they burn fat, how they just generally feel with their stress, with their anxiety, their mental health. So much that pins on that on hormones really, and I suppose how dysfunctional they become or how balanced they are can really change, can do a complete 180 on someone. And look, this episode, for example, the reason I went down that space with the products is I wanted to give people access to tools to improve their health, right? And that meant trying to go, well, if we want to try and put things out there that are going to help people improve their health, what's the most meaningful way I can do that? And the hormone, helping to improve hormonal balance is definitely the way. I mean, both you and I, we've seen what happens with people who have come into your store or customers I've seen at seminars, guys with lower testosterone and suboptimal testosterone, mate, it's night and day as to what they are with someone with optimal hormones. That depression, lack of libido, lack of energy, lack of drive, lack of motivation. They just feel just apathetic and drab and down. And we've got slower metabolism, so we're holding body fat around our lower stomach. We've got man boobs coming along. We've got all fluid retention. We've got.
But isn't it? That's a really interesting point, though, Will. I'll just stop you there, and we'll come back to that. But isn't it so interesting that the thing that the person is coming in and telling you is their issue is probably something that's a long way downstream. So I could have someone, for example, come into the store and say, Stu, I'm starting to get these man boobs starting to form, or I'm really tired and lethargic, and they want that problem solved. Yeah. And it's like, let's get some stimulants. Let's get and it's like they're really just focusing in on the outcome or the symptom rather than looking at the cause, and I think that's a really interesting point.
That is so pertinent, mate. I was chatting to my sales reps about this before, and I was doing some staff training this week, and they were talking about I suppose the easiest road would be to make what people think they need, right? People come in, they're tired, they lack motivation, they lack energy to go and train or do things. So the easiest road is to give people just a bunch of stimulants and give them, this synthetic energy and just go, cool, here you go, here's your Band-Aid, right? The harder sell and the harder road, but the more holistic one is giving people what they don't know they need, but as opposed to what they want. So what they want and what they need are two very different pictures, right? What they need is quite often the opposite of what the reason they're tired and lethargic is from that crappy sleep, because of the high cortisol, because of the high stimulants. Putting more stimulants on it's just putting fuel on a fire. We want to go the opposite way, and
I think though too, Will, is something that I think is really interesting and is probably really hard from a sales point, is that sometimes giving them that stimulant gives them this acute effect whereby they feel that the issue is being resolved, and what's really going to fix the problem won't have that acute effect necessarily. And that's really hard. It's really hard when someone's taking a product that doesn't have any acute effect, and they need to give it some time to see the outcomes. And a lot of times people can then go, well, I just got better. Like they don't actually draw the connection between the fact that I was taking a natural testosterone booster, I was taking something to help naturally reduce cortisol levels or whatever it might be. It's really, really hard to, I guess, keep front of the consumer's mind that there is an impact from this. You have to stick with it. You have to use it every day, and you're going to see eventually you're not going to have that lethargy anymore, or you're not going to have those issues with your libido or with your mood or whatever it might be. So trying to explain to a customer that just because when you take this, you feel nothing, definitely does not mean it does nothing.
That's a big disparity. But that's why it's so valuable we've got you on here, mate, having that every day of the week. You're in front of people, talking to real everyday people about these issues. And so you see it firsthand what the expectation might be, or what problem they want solved, what band-aid they want here and now. And look, sometimes it is as simple as, hey, look, here's something that will get you in the gym, make you train a bit harder for the short term, whilst using something that can also fix the reason you're coming and asking for something for energy, right? So it might be a synergistic answer, but I think this is an area that I know that a lot of there's been a lot of focus on mental health in recent years, and I think the fact that 75% of suicides are from men is a huge link between that and declining testosterone levels being in recent decades. We've seen now they think the testosterone levels of the average 20-year-old now is that of a 60-year-old back in the 60s. In the last 50, 60 years, we've seen 20, 30, 40% decline in average testosterone levels. They keep moving the therapeutic normal range of testosterone from, it used to be, 11s to sort of 35s, then it got down to 9 to 32, then got down to 8 to 31. Now even 7s, they're considering subpar. If your natural testosterone levels are at 7, you want to kill yourself. You're in a really bad place. You are feeling horrible. You're lacking motivation. You've got the full dad bod going on because your metabolism's slow. You're not building muscle. You have, like erectile dysfunction, low, like everything is just going south, right? But you get a blood test, go to your doctor going, I feel a bit off. I might just get some bloods. Well, they hesitantly do the bloods. You go through the Medicare system, you get your bloods done. They come back and they go, oh, you're normal. Well, the range is as big as a barn door. So, I think where we have a great opportunity, and when to answer the question way back at the start, why did I do it with Primer? Sometimes whilst the health system currently now is geared towards band-aids on sick people versus preventing people getting to sickness, it might be best for us to give tools to those in the interim to improve their health, before they need help. So I guess that's more of the origin story of the why. So, but I see it a lot, man. I see young guys, really, I see dudes in their 20s who are issues with energy and libido and stress and sleep, and come back and get their bloods back. And I'm seeing guys in their 20s with testosterone levels in the 10s and teens. And
mate, it's so true what you just said, and that's something that I reiterate to customers every day. One question that I usually ask, if things are dire, I'll say, have you had bloods done? And the response is normally exactly what you said. Yes, and everything's normal. And I'll say, okay, well, there's normal. We have what we call the normal healthy range. And like you said, it is exactly that. It's a range, and that range is quite vast. So what I'm looking for is I'm trying to get you to optimal. I don't just want you sitting somewhere in that range, especially if you're, at the far end of where we want to be. I want you sitting, up at 35 plus. And I've had the same thing. I've had, guys in their early 20s even possibly have abused some anabolics or whatever. And, natural testosterone's sitting at 11.
Yeah.
And the doctor's telling them you're in the normal healthy range. And they're like, well, why? How come when my missus takes her top off, nothing happens down there? How come I'm feeling like I want to neck myself every day? How come come I'm struggling to sleep at night, but I'm awake, like I'm lethargic all through the day? Like, what's going on here? And it's like, well, let's get you back to optimal. And I think that really is, I guess, where I sort of started down the hormone route with GLA as well. I was a little bit different though. I actually never intended to build a brand. I released a product called Lipodrine as a replacement for a product that was pulled from the shelves. And everyone was complaining this product Ping was pulled from the shelves, and everyone complained because it was such a fantastic fat stripper, but it happened to contain yohimbine extract and a few different things that weren't allowed anymore. And I went, you know what, maybe I can't do that exactly, but I can get something pretty close with what we do have, and I can do it in a single capsule. So that was the starting point. But obviously once you get into that territory of doing a brand, and you start thinking, why isn't anybody doing XYZ with a test booster? Why isn't anybody doing this with a cortisol reduction agent? Why isn't anybody doing this with an estrogen modulator? And you get to a point where you just go, well, I've waited long enough to see someone else do it. I'm just going to do it. And that's really how I got into the hormone space with GLA, because I saw that there was products that existed out there. Some were okay. Some weren't really that great. And I went, I think I can do this a lot better. And for me too, personally, with test boosters aside, I was someone who was struggling with, with depression and anxiety, and, I was using a lot of Valium and stuff like that. So for me, I started experimenting with herbal compounds to try and make myself feel better. And that was where Cortidrine originated, was to help me ditch the Valium and get onto something that wasn't, going to be organ toxic and wasn't going to be, addictive and
that's
sort of issues that
that's
have.
a big issue, isn't it? And I think that's probably the big culprit that I see is dampening a lot of guys' testosterone levels is stress. Now, stress is where I've sort of put my life's work into working around cortisol and I think it was episode 38 or 39 when I just did one solo before on cortisol's not a bad listen, but Stu and I will finally get a chance to do one with us in this series, I'm sure too. But stress is such a major factor in reducing testosterone levels. There's this pendulum between when cortisol's high, circulating testosterone's low. When testosterone's high, cortisol tends to dampen as well. And we see it time and time again with people. And a lot of the younger guys, that's what it is. We've got the stresses of just society now being what they are. We've got work, kids, family, relationships. We've got all these things coming in, stimulant use as well, one too many coffees throughout the day, under eating, overtraining, whatever your sources of stress are. That increase in that cortisol on that, which is on that pendulum, that opposite end of the spectrum to supporting testosterone, is where a lot of guys I think come unstuck, and it's a really common culprit to why testosterone can take a hit. So I suppose to walk into the space and start chatting about what are natural test boosters, how do we categorize them, and I suppose what is testosterone, I suppose, and what it does would probably be good too, man. So
and just before we dive into specific compounds, I think that something that's really, really important for us to touch on is the fact that we have real compounds, we have real botanical compounds, we have real amino acid based compounds, we have real chemicals that we can use in these things that are safe and natural, that have an impact on testosterone levels. So I just want to get the baseline set. So because there's a lot of skepticism out there, and it frustrates the hell out of me when I just hear people say testosterone boosters don't work, or I'm like, what are you basing that on? Like, what do you mean testosterone? What if here's some data? Like, let's have a look at Tonkat Ali, for example. We can show in almost every peer-reviewed study and clinical trial that's been done on it, we see increases in blood serum testosterone. So I think that's a point that we need to start with. We have very real compounds that we can use to increase production of natural testosterone, and they're available to us, they're legal, they're safe, and they're effective.
Yeah, 1,000%. And that's where I think the industry's changed a bit as well, in that we have, as we've had access to more and more research and research has caught up with the industry, which is very much the case all the time. A lot of the time, the industry is very cutting edge. You have a lot of people, a lot of really great minds that are very progressive, always looking for new compounds, new areas. And sometimes it can take the research 5, 10, 20 years to catch up to that. If we're discovering things now, like, look at the recent testosterone fad, right? That came to light, blew up in popularity, and there still hasn't been human studies to catch up to it yet. There will be now, I'm sure. There's been interest in it. I'm sure there'll be more data available, but I suppose we're still relying heavily on rodent studies, which seems to work similarly when it translates to humans. But I suppose it's always useful to say now we're finally catching up a bit. And but often the supplement industry is a few steps ahead of the research, and a lot of these herbs are have been used for centuries in a lot of cases, and it might not have peer-reviewed studies, but it has thousands of years of anecdotal evidence. I think Tonkat Ali is a great place to start, because it sort of signaled the change in test boosters, right? I think before this, Stu, certainly in your time in stores, you would have seen very, very much the dominance of the tribulus, the fenugreeks, the D-aspartic acids. That was a big phase. The 3 grams of D-aspartic will increase your total testosterone by 40% with some of the early studies. And, we've seen all the, and, tribulus, that fantastic mood, a boost in libido, a little bit of, help with luteinizing hormone, and fenugreek had some benefits. And that was very much dominant in probably what would you say, man? Probably early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, look, even like we still get guys coming in asking for D-aspartic acid and for straight tribulus. And I don't think that those compounds don't have a place anymore. I think that we were dealing with the best that we had at the time. Now, when we look at things like D-aspartic acid and tribulus, some of the outcomes that we see when we take those, I guess, mirror what you would see if testosterone was increasing. So you can see why a lot of times when maybe testosterone wasn't necessarily increasing, we felt as though it was, because there was some outcomes that were similar. We would see, mood enhancement. We would see that increase in libido, but some of the mechanisms for that weren't necessarily because testosterone was increasing. I mean, like, look, you look at D-aspartic acid. There's some really awesome data on D-aspartic acid's ability to increase sperm count and total semen load. So, there's definitely some benefits to some of this stuff. Whether or not it increases testosterone, is probably not as important as the fact that there's some really positive outcomes from it. So, I use D-aspartic acid and tribulus in my product Testoderm, but I just don't lean on those as the main ingredients for increasing testosterone. I still feel that it's nice to have them in there. Tribulus is one of those really interesting ones where there's some exciting studies on tribulus, but there's also some studies where the placebo performs as well, if not better than the tribulus. And we don't really like to see that,
Not ideal when the placebo is on par with the active ingredient. It has got some nice perks. One thing that is notable and is always reported is that anecdotal evidence on it, at least, is libido almost always quite reliably improves. And if a lot of people who first walk into this space and might suspect that testosterone is the reason they're having less than optimal health, less than optimal recovery results, fat loss, muscle building, whatever it is, whatever's making them have a hard time, that's made them go, maybe there's something wrong here. Low libido, erectile dysfunction, that's a common area that gets guys going, okay, I need to look into this. That's a big one. And I think tribulus does answer one of those problems in that I suppose libido and ED is a big part of tribulus's attraction. Like you said, doesn't necessarily correlate to increases in serum tests all the time. Had a little bit of data around showing increases in free testosterone, and for our listeners, there is a difference with total testosterone and free testosterone. And free testosterone is the actual testosterone floating around, binding to receptors, doing the anabolic work of testosterone, doing all the great things it does with dopamine and with muscle building and fat loss and so on. But that's only usually about 2% of your total testosterone. So you can have someone with total test of 600, 800, 1,000, and with free testosterones, of that 8 to 31 we spoke about before, it's only usually 2-ish% of the total picture. So when Stu and I are talking throughout this episode on free test or total test, we're talking about that relationship. And I suppose there's a few hormones that interact that can, during periods of high stress or higher estrogen or other hormones coming into play, they can decrease that amount of free testosterone. And Tomcat did have a bit of early data showing it could help increase that free testosterone, just like Tomcat does. Tomcat does some great stuff with free testosterone. So that's just to clarify for anyone listening at home. We're going to be talking about both. Still the same hormone, just free versus bound. It's
such a complex area, isn't it, Will? Because we've got compounds that we're looking at with manipulating free testosterone. We're looking at manipulating total testosterone. We're also looking at the receptors themselves. We're looking at how well are the receptors taking up this testosterone. Like there's just so many different avenues and angles to increasing outcomes from or improving outcomes from increasing testosterone. And it's a really exciting area. Like for me, as someone who came from, enhanced bodybuilding, where we were literally using testosterone, and I've given that up kind of long ago, and now I'm a dad, and I'm kind of, I've gone down the natural path. I'm always trying to find that bridge. I'm always trying to find something that's just giving me that little bit more than creatine, but without kind of going to that enhanced sort of stage. So for me, the test booster space and the anabolic agent space or natural anabolic agent space it's an exciting space. That's really where I love looking into this stuff, because let's face it, we all want something that's going to just make us explode with anabolic hormones, that's natural, that's safe, that's non-organ toxic, and this would be the holy grail, right?
Yeah, and look, I think but more importantly for men as well, and as we do get moving on a little bit, I mean, historically we would have said before, you don't need to, people ask, when should I use one? Why should I use one? And so on. I think a lot of guys didn't even think about it until they thought, you have to be in your 50s and 60s to even care about testosterone being lower. Look, it does decline the rate of between 1% and 2% per year from the age of about 25, 26, 27 onwards. So around your mid to late 20s, it peaks, and then it sort of starts declining steadily. But to answer the question of, I suppose, right at the very beginning, who should use a test booster? That's a pretty relevant area to start. Who should use one? Now, I think because of how prevalent stress is, environmental factors too, like having BPAs, plastics, microplastics, and cosmetics, soys, xenoestrogens, phytoestrogens, a lot of things in our environments are lowering testosterone, and nothing's really boosting it, environmentally speaking. And I think so. Really, the answer to that question is pretty much anyone now, probably from your 20s onwards, could probably benefit from looking at something to optimize your natural production. And I think the benefits that we could look at as the next most meaningful place are like the mood, the energy, the motivation, just that feeling of, when you're like 18, you just want to tackle the world, and you're like, I'm going to own this place. This shit's my oyster. That rule, like let's go, let's have drive and really get
like muscle building aside, because I think that's a common misconception as well. People go, why would I take a test booster? I don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's like, testosterone is an anabolic hormone. It's not the only anabolic hormone, by the way, but it is an anabolic hormone. And, when it's present in a large quantity, it allows you to put on more muscle, and allows you to gain strength. But that's to me, a really small part of really why we're prescribing these. I probably recommend test boosters to as many girls as I do guys. And that's a really interesting area as well. But like you said, just mood, I don't even want to say mood enhancement. I just want to say general virility. You're just feeling amazing. You're feeling like you did when you're 18. Yeah. You want to run, down the street for no particular reason. You're just feeling really on top of the world. And this is the lifeblood hormone.
It is. And it's so important as we age for all things to do with longevity. Having optimal testosterone is important for everything, how we age, how our muscle mass sticks around, how our body fat sticks around, Alzheimer's, dementia. It's very neuroprotective. There's a massive link between testosterone and dopamine as well. When dopamine's high, test is high, test is low, dopamine's low. And dopamine's our primary neurotransmitter for reward, for drive, for pursuit of a reward as well. So for actually motivating us to go towards reward. So we can see very quickly how it's got this, I suppose, optimal testosterone levels can stave off dementia, Alzheimer's, things with, cognitive decline. It can help with maintaining bone mineral density, just like in women where optimal estrogen is an optimal primary sex hormone levels are super important for overall health. So same with men, but no one looks at it because it's got a bit of stigma around testosterone in the Australian healthcare system, whereas in the States, HRT is a lot more common, I suppose. And I guess where the bridge is here is, I suppose, clarifying for our listeners the difference between, say, natural test boosters versus exogenous, right? Like every day of the week we get asked by customers, do I need a PCT after this? Will this shut me down? Can I use this and still be natural? And all this sort of
or
stuff.
a woman, am I going to grow a beard when I take this?
yeah. And look, why women should use test boosters is super useful too. But to distinguish for our guests, for our listeners, like I suppose what we're doing with the natural testosterone booster is we're using compounds like your Tonkat Ali's, your Shilajits, your Bulbines, your Tubuluses, your Fenugreeks, all these things to help stimulate either luteinizing hormone or encourage natural production or free up more testosterone, decrease bound test. We're trying to optimize your natural level, right?
That's 100% right. Well, the way that I explain it to customers to really simplify and get it in the most concise way I possibly can is this. If we're looking at things like anabolic steroids, we're taking a synthetic version of testosterone and we're pumping it straight into our body, right? This is what anabolic steroids are. The synthetic versions of testosterone that we're literally sticking in our butt to increase our testosterone levels through synthetic testosterone. I like to think of test boosters like superfood for your natural production of testosterone. So this is a trigger to tell your body, hey, switch on and start producing this stuff the way that you should. And when your body is the one that's making the stuff, it's never going to produce testosterone at a level that's dangerous. It's never going to produce testosterone at a level that warrants a PCT. It's never going to produce it at a level that's going to cause, facial hair growth in women or, severe body acne in men. Your body just won't do that. So it's still your body that's making the testosterone when you're taking a natural testosterone booster, and it's not your body that's making the testosterone when you're taking exogenous testosterone or anabolic steroids.
100%. And hormone replacement therapy is an area that's very interesting. We probably should do an episode just on that in itself. Benefits for men, for longevity and so on. At looking at at that area, it's a bit stigmatized in Australia. A lot in women, though, postmenopausal, they'll quite often look at hormone replacement therapy, but with men, with being on a script for testosterone replacement, has a bit of a stigma. But in general, I think what we can all agree on is as whether it's exogenous hormone or natural testosterone production or encouraging our own production, essentially optimal testosterone levels are crucial for health, for longevity, for aging, for cognitive health, for literally every part of your physiology responds to how your androgens are. So I think we can really can't stress enough how super important it is to have this because it's that optimal testosterone sits above everything, right? That dictates your metabolic rate with thyroid function, dictates where your androgen ratio is for your overall body shape and appearance. And I guess what we'll do as this next little chapter is probably go through how some of the main compounds that have come into recent light help this big picture of trying to get this optimal testosterone for people and get this optimal picture of health for men and women, because androgens are very important for women too. And then, and what dosages to look for and how to use them and stuff. And we'll just pick 3 or 4 of the most common, probably to keep it, I guess, concise for people. But some of our favorites we'll go through today. So Stu, why don't you crack it? What's your favorite?
Well, I want to start at the real base. All right. Before we get into herbal compounds, I want to start at zinc, magnesium, and B6.
Oh, the old ZMA. Yes, yeah. The classic.
That's where I want to start. Like at the end of the day, every biochemical process that happens in our body, every hormone that's produced starts at, micronutrients that we feed into the body for these hormones to be able to be created in the first place. Zinc probably being the lord of the 3, but zinc, magnesium, and B6, to me, these are like the foundational blocks of building testosterone. I think most people these days are taking a good quality multivitamin that contains those anyway. But, I think as a starting point, if someone's looking to optimize testosterone, make sure that your multivitamin contains zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B6. Or look like there are test boosters that contain ZMA, or you can take a ZMA supplement on its own. But for me, zinc, magnesium, B6, that's the starting point. What would you say about that, Will?
Yeah, dosages on the zinc, 10 to 20 milligrams per day for men, women, 5 to 15 milligrams. Magnesium, 200 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium is important for people. So what that means is certain compounds like magnesium citrate's a super common one you'll see in most things. That's about 60% of the citric acid bound to magnesium. So out of 100 milligrams of magnesium citrate, you might only get 40 milligrams of actual magnesium, 40 to 60 milligrams of actual elemental magnesium. So just to clarify for listeners, when we're talking about a ZMA supplement, how that helps, they're definitely the cofactors. They're the nutrients required to produce, everything, thyroid hormone, actual hormone, really important. Dosages for those you want to look for in your products or in your multivitamin you're taking at home, probably, 10 to 20 milligrams of zinc. Magnesium, 2 to 400 megs of elemental magnesium will cover men and women. And then B6, look, 5-10 milligrams is usually plenty, depending on what form you've got for that. And quite a useful. I put it in my test booster for a reason. I'm sure you've got it floating around somewhere in your stacks. It's a great.
Mine's got ZMA in the test booster.
Wonderful. It's a classic, man. It's a real classic one. It's been around for forever. Like when you talk to the real old school dudes, the guys who were bodybuilding in the 80s and 90s and stuff, those guys are all running, that was like the thing back then, wasn't it? It was like ZMA and the Weeder whey powder was like their big, that was their big, the milk powder and the ZMA was their big anabolic combo. And creatine exploded. So okay, beautiful. ZMA, number one.
ZMA is our starting point. I think we probably have skimmed over tribulus and D-aspartic acid enough, and they're not really at the forefront of what we're looking at the moment. But I think that, Will, you could probably shed a little bit more light on Tongkat Ali for us. We talked briefly about Tongkat Ali, also known as Uricoma longifolia. This is a plant extract, and we've seen some pretty profound data on this, and I look at this as like a critical ingredient in test boosters. But you're probably the man to really sort of delve into it a little bit more for us. So what are you saying on Tongkat?
Yeah, so otherwise I was like Malaysian ginseng. Tongkat Ali is a wicked one because, and unfortunately they're looking at banning it next year for use. Well, in therapeutic goods, it's currently not allowed anyway. So, until when capsules have got another 12 months in them, so any listeners who are keen on trying Tongkat Ali for themselves, you probably got another sort of 6 months, 9 months or so to sort of get behind it. But the reason that both Stu and I have used it in our test boosters is because I suppose the data showed, for example, using 200 milligrams of Tongkat Ali twice per day showed a 37% increase in free testosterone and a resulting 16% decrease in cortisol as well. So just like that pendulum we spoke about before with testosterone and cortisol, works as a mild adaptogen on lowering stresses. And that, as we see, just like with ashwagandha, you see a very common herb for lowering stresses. Ashwagandha is similar, 300 milligrams twice a day, lowers cortisol by 32%, but boosts testosterone by 15%. So we see this relationship almost to the exact percentage. Down 32 for stress, up 15 for test. Tongkat Ali, testosterone goes up 37, stress drops 16%. So you see this really nice, clear linear relationship when you see test. And so it works on both pathways. And by increasing that, it also works with fertility, works with vitality, resilience as well. It really helps to boost that overall feeling of just vitality and virility. But free testosterone is where it really thrives, and that's a 37% increase is a massive boost. That's a huge.
That's going to be a notable increase. That's something you're physically going to feel it's kind of a hard comparison to make because we talk about anabolics and people are sometimes looking for the way that they feel on those. But when we're talking about hundreds of times increase in testosterone levels, we're not going to match that with something like like one of these plant extracts, but the 37% increase is definitely going to be noteworthy. It's not something that you're not going to notice.
1,000%. And it's going to be something that's going to be, I suppose, genuinely, we want to look at, we have supra physiological levels when talking about exogenous hormones. So we're, like steroids or what have you. We're talking about supra as in above your natural physiological levels of hormone. And that is when things get a little bit haywire as well with side effects sometimes as well, is because our body's got way more than it knows what to do with. Whereas what we're talking about here is if you can optimize, I've had guys do blood tests for me using, like I suppose compounds that I've got. I go very heavy with Tongkat. in mine, and I just love it because you feel that energy boost, you feel that increase in virility, you feel that libido, you just feel it. 37% from a natural perspective is huge. That's a massive mover of the needle for someone. So I would say Tomcat's pretty much one of my favorites. I mean, probably seconded by Shilajit would be one of my favorites. That wasn't always popular, but it's gotten a bit of light in recent probably 18 months or so.
See, I haven't used Shilajit in testosterone, but definitely if I had like this much more space to fit it in, I would have got it in there, because that would be the next in my firing line that I would have got in. But yeah, I think that probably products like Primal Test and some of the others that came out at around that time really did bolster it into I guess the limelight. And these mushroom compounds, like aren't we getting so many cool things from mushrooms like these days?
Man, they're so wicked. They've just got this beautiful romance about them too, because they're so guarded by the Orientals, right? Like they only entered the Chinese pharmacopoeia, so like the main publication on botanicals and on any sort of natural medicines. So the recognised as a natural medicine, an alternative medicine essentially. So the Chinese pharmacopoeia, I think, was published in 2010. They entered it in, but it's been used for centuries by emperors. But it was always protected as for the royalty, like reishi and lion's mane and so on. These were compounds that traditionally in Chinese medicine were reserved purely for the royalty. And now we're so fortunate that we've got people who are broad acre farming and standardizing and allowing it in common access in supplements. And the amount of things these things can do, mate, is amazing. Like they can help modulate immune system, energy production. They can modulate liver function, detoxification. They can, hormones as well. Lion's mane is one that comes to mind for I suppose, a bit of interest as well. So probably like lion's mane is one that's probably been thrown around quite a bit for being touting some I suppose testosterone boosting benefits. So I'm still reading into that, and I think from what I can see, it tends to be it seems to assist in multiple pathways I can see that would be helpful. Probably a bit of cortisol buffering as an adaptogen. It's very neuroprotective and cognitively enhancing as well.
Yeah, you're seeing it in a lot of nootropics now.
Yeah, which is cool, man. Nootropics are a space that I think we'll have to do for sure one day. I think we geeked out on it pretty well. If any of our listeners wanted to go into a nootropics episode, we started to touch on a few new experimental ones with, I believe it was Lucas in the ergogenic health one.
Nootropics, man.
Yeah, nootropics.
He's the prince of nootropics.
He is, mate. And I think the Gorilla Chemist, we also spoke about a few as well in that episode. And I think he's actually keen to come back for part 2, Stu. So when we get time, we'll have to get Brian back in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's keen to talk about it. So yeah, look, some of the medicinal mushrooms are super helpful as well for overall virility as well. So probably got the tomcats, some of the medicinal mushrooms like your lion's manes. Look, I'll briefly.
Let's get into ecdysteroids.
Yeah, they're cool.
This is like ecdysteroids are something that a lot of people don't understand because they've got steroid in the name. People tend to shy away from them a little bit. And you're probably going to be, once again, like, for those who listen to our show regularly, that Will is our, I guess he's our guy with the nose in the books. If you want to know about a study, if you want to know about like detailed information, Will's going to be your man. So I'm going to lean on Will heavily for this stuff. But Will, let's talk about ecdysteroids. Let's talk about why they aren't anabolic steroids. Let's talk about what they are. Let's talk about some different kinds. I love ecdysteroids.
Definitely, they're cool compounds, man. So there's like phyto-active steroids and there's ecdysterone. So a lot of people recently have looked at like ecdysterones in a big way. And I suppose the difference is so plant-based. There are like phyto-ecdysterones, plant compounds like laxogenin. That's a common one, right? And I actually use that in my test booster because I love that. But now, when you say they're not hormonal, you're 100% correct, mate. They don't modulate hormones, which is nice. So they generally, they call them a plant steroid. So the saponins, the plant compounds, they call them steroidal compounds, but they don't affect hormones. So they're not suppressive. They don't increase. They don't decrease. They're just purely plant compounds that modulate things primarily around things like muscle protein synthesis, so MPS, the rate that you turn protein to muscles. We pick like laxogenin is a great example and a pretty popular, well-known sort of phytoecdysterone. It's one that helps to, it increased muscle protein synthesis by 220% when used at 1 milligram per kilo. So 100 kilo dude, 100 milligrams of laxogenin, and that was 220% increase in muscle protein synthesis and a corresponding reduction in muscle breakdown as well. I forget that study, what the percentage in muscle breakdown reduction was, but it essentially lead to higher amounts of nitrogen retention. So as in you're turning more muscle, you're turning more protein over into new tissue, and you're stopping the breakdown of existing tissue. So they're really quite protective on muscle mass. If you're dieting, really good if you're bulking too, to accelerate. If you're using them, you probably want to, I suppose, increase your protein intake, because it's pointless putting the foot on the gas with protein synthesis if you haven't got available amino acids and the building blocks being protein, right? So it's sort of like putting the foot on the gas on the accelerator for muscle protein synthesis, saying make more, but you need the base resource. You need fuel in the tank as well to build that resource with. So probably bump up protein per kilo by if you're doing sort of 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo, maybe go like 2.5 grams per kilo of protein.
But I always go 2.5 grams per kilo, purely because I look at it like this. If I'm building a brick wall, I'm not going to order the exact amount of bricks that I need down to the last brick, right? I'm going to order some fudge factor. I'd rather have too many bricks than not enough bricks. So I shoot for 2.5 grams per kilo all the time.
Yeah, nice. That's a good analogy, man. This is why it's so valuable, mate, having you there to try and bring in, I suppose, people who are new to these compounds and people who are, I suppose, talking to the customers each day. It's great to have all these studies relevant, but you can't make it relevant to someone if you can't translate it. And you've always shone in that area, man. So and I think in this topic in particular, some of it gets a bit complicated. But where it's useful is, I suppose, ecdysterones next being, well, I suppose things like testosterone's been a massive one in recent times.
Yeah.
A lot massive area, right? And I've got a good friend who's just recently put out, he's down in Melbourne with Level Up Health at Kyle. He's put together like a 30-page publication finally on all the data he could find online on Turk. He's become a bit of an authority on it. I know there's been some like Ben Greenfield's interested. We've had Lucas with Ergogenic as well. We've had a fair few people who know their shit quite interested in this compound. So similar sort of mechanisms, right? We're seeing, I suppose, a bit of increases in muscle protein synthesis. We're seeing decreases in muscle protein breakdown. Also a mild adaptogenic effect in lowering cortisol to a certain extent. The difference being, from what I can read so far, is that it also seems to be a bit of a beta estrogen receptor agonist. What that means is that, I suppose, limiting some estrogenic activity in layman's terms. So I suppose, which is handy when you're trying to lean up in some areas. If you're trying to, like for men, when estrogen's a bit higher, and this happens super commonly. Like I know that guys don't really look at estrogen as a hormone, and it's going to be a problem. I'm pretty estrogenic by nature, being endomorphic, and I sort of hold body fat around my lower chest is a real kicker to try and lean up. Like lower stomach, love handles, and lower back have always been hard areas for me to shift. And I suppose if those sort of areas have been trouble areas for you historically, chances are estrogen is something worth looking at. So I suppose really, really good for those trouble areas. So Turk's probably really great when you're dieting, because it's going to be very protective of muscle, probably really good for recovery as well if you're training really hard. Most of those ecdysterones and phyto-active will do that as well. Ecdysteroids, will do so as well. So like your laxogens, your testosterones, really, really good for that.
I love, I just from a, I guess, personal point of view, I really just love testosterone. And, I do have a testosterone product on the market, as you know, but for me, as just, someone who has used pretty much all these compounds that we've mentioned in the podcast at one point or another, for me, testosterone is quite exciting, just in the, in the results that I see. I'm not going to say that like I take it and I like explode into a competitive bodybuilder, but I definitely notice some extra strength in the gym. I seem to be able to push out those forced reps, a few more of those. And I definitely feel fuller and harder all the time. I've just got that nice, full, hard feeling to my muscles, which is really nice to have. But I think that probably can be said with, like ecdysterone as well, laxogenin to an extent. I used to love, I can't remember who did it, but one of the brands did a really simple capsule product, and it was just a combination of laxogenin and ecdysterone. And it was fantastic. It was really, really good product. Like you used it and you just felt amazing. You were stronger. You were getting that little bit bigger. So sometimes these things can be used in really simple combinations and still deliver quite profound results.
Yeah, they really can. They're quite potent for their credit. I think like Matt Legg with ATP was one of the early sort of pioneers in this space. I think was actually the mechanism of Prototype 8 was originally built around a dermal cream that could be applied to your skin that was actually very rich in ecdysteroids, which I suppose his were actually derived like with insects was the interesting part. A lot of them were, I suppose, the thorax and the carapace of the actual insect. They found that these ecdysteroids were compounds that would actually help them rebuild and regenerate that exoskeleton basically a lot faster. And in insects, when they were repairing and building this shell, ecdysteroids were one of the things that were helping to do it. And I think Matt put that into Prototype 8, interestingly enough, as a bit of a local anabolic agent that you could use, locally and really increase that protein synthesis and what have you. So a fair few people have sort of looked in this area, but for differing reasons and different, I suppose, from in recent times, though, having that spotlight on testosterone these last 6 months has really brought a lot more attention to it. But it's great. It's a natural muscle builder that has no suppressive effects or issues, very safe and a nice alternative for a lot of guys who would otherwise turn to SARMs or to testosterone replacement or PEDs. Like I think SARMs, and to clarify, SARMs I think are an area that we might just briefly dabble on.
We better touch on them because so many guys don't know the difference between anabolic steroids, SARMs, and peptides. It's a really it's something that needs to be mentioned because I think they just think that SARMs are steroids that you take, anabolic steroids that you take orally. That the classic belief is that you don't need any PCT and you're just fine. You just take them and just go about your life.
Well, they weren't meant to be suppressive. In the theory of them. And again, a lot of the studies were rodent or in cancer patients or in muscle wasting patients. So they were much lower doses than we see in commercially available like SARMs, like LGD, for example, Ligandrol. Like LGD 4033 was one of the early guys that was one of the most potent muscle builders out of the SARMs that I noticed. I suppose it was, if you did the conversions from like where they put it in rodent studies and so on for muscle, for muscle wastage, it would equate to like 0.5 to 1.5 milligrams. And a lot of our over-the-counter supplements back when they were legal to sell were like 10 milligrams. So they weren't suppressive in the doses they used in studies early on. But I'm still trying to theorize the mechanism of it. I think the reason they end up being so suppressive, particularly LGD, RAD as well, and MK2866 or Ostarine, those like probably the least suppressive. But I think that the reason was they're antagonizing androgen receptors to basically increase anabolic activity. So what they're doing is they bind to androgen receptors. That's why it's a selective androgen receptor modulator. So they actually bind to a receptor, turn it on or off to try and modulate anabolic activity, as opposed to a natural test booster, which we've been talking about most of this episode, which is encouraging natural production, but not binding to receptors, not doing anything, not being suppressive. But SARMs, for people who are still under the illusion they're not suppressive, they are. I've seen a lot of blood tests. 100%.
I've got a customer who's 27 years old, and he's now on hormone replacement therapy for the rest of his life because he abused SARMs, thinking that they were totally safe. And he's totally destroyed his ability to produce testosterone at all. So it's definitely, there's definitely some issues that can come from it. And I think that false sense of security was probably more of a dangerous thing than anything else, because guys just went hell for leather. When you're introducing something to a group that tends to be a little bit cowboyish anyway, like you and I have seen it, you put a pre-workout on the market, do not exceed 1 scoop, and guys double scoop, triple scoop. So you've got this group of people that tends to push the limits. You release something, you say this has similar outcomes to anabolic steroids as far as outer appearance is concerned, and it's safe. They go, safe?
Yeah,
right.
Damn, double the dose, triple the dose. I know it's a hard one, and some of these are very potently suppressive. So anyone using SARMs, whilst a full-blown PCT, where I suppose post-cycle therapy is something that we've thrown around a few times, that's basically a campaign where you're using particular compounds to try to kickstart your natural production again. Just like we're doing with natural testosterone boosters, using certain compounds to help, like clomiphene or taxmonophene, i.e. Nolvadex, or pregnolas or HCG, compounds like this to restart natural production, kickstart that luteinizing hormone stimulation, and get that natural testosterone on again. So that's what we're saying with PCT. Look, with SARMs, you probably don't need a full-blown one, but you definitely want to use a natural testosterone booster alongside that SARM cycle or afterwards, so.
Yeah, you want to be switching things back on, I think that's really important, like at the end of the day, when we're producing testosterone, like let's look at steroids again for a second, because it's always kind of a good reference point. And we take these anabolic compounds that are, at these superhuman levels. Our body will tend to try and shut down its natural production, because you've got to remember that our brain or our pituitary gland does not recognize that this increase in testosterone has come exogenously. It just thinks that production from the testes is out of control. So what it tries to do is it tries to shut down all production to try and bring those levels down. Now, when that doesn't happen, it starts to have an impact on all sorts of hormones, because your body's always trying to create homeostasis, right? It wants to balance things. It wants to get things back to where they should be. When your testosterone levels at 200 or 300 times what it should be, our body creates some interesting handbrakes. Yeah, it's trying to stop things.
Yeah, it does.
It switches them off. So we got to actively switch them back on, especially if they've been off for a long time. Yeah. The longer the cycle, the longer that you've had this suppression for, the harder it is to get it started. It's like an old lawnmower, right? It's like if you've left it seized for too long, it's going to be a lot harder to get started again than if you're just kicking it over or fairly regularly.
And that's an area where I think a lot of guys do come to the natural test booster levels as people who have played in the past with PEDs or with SARMs or with anabolics and competed in bodybuilding, or maybe just dabbled with these things and didn't quite know what they were doing in the past and wanted to restore their natural production. And I think there are some compounds that can definitely help with fertility. Like for example, like I spoke on Shilajit before. If you're using natural test booster for virility and fertility, Shilajit's a really cool one, because they call it the conqueror of mountains. It's a fulvic mineral basically, and it's a resin that they use they extract it from plant roots. That it's basically a combination of organic matter, and carbonaceous organic matter that's collected over time. And put, then I suppose apply pressure and time to this. So it's almost like a geological compound. But this resin Shilajit works by essentially increasing sperm production. I believe total sperm production was increased by 60%, and sperm motility was increased by like 30%. So it's a really, like when customers ask you, do test boosters work? Like, well, we've got Tonkat Ali there. When you're using, in that range of 200 to 400 milligrams per day, we're looking at hitting that 37% increase in free testosterone. We've got Shilajit in there increasing sperm motility by 60%, sperm production by 60%. We've got things like Bulbine with rodent studies showing 40% increases in total testosterone as well. We've got, so there's really meaningful data from these, compounds that's coming that we've got, and there's no real, I suppose, something that has no side effects that improves health and well-being and really optimizes.
Like where's the drawback?
Where's the drawback, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Like, I use them year round, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to be optimal?
I don't come off my natural test boosters really ever. Unless I've just run out and haven't had the money to grab another one. What did you say kind of what do they call the Shiljat? What's that kind of folk name for it?
Conqueror of mountains.
Conqueror of mountains. I love it how they give these folk names to some of these compounds. I know Tonkat Ali is known as the Malaysian homegrown Viagra.
And studies are pretty comparable, man. The same with like Bulbine got some cool studies like that. Bulbine had some studies where they compared it. They did a double-blind placebo-controlled study. So they actually had groups who no one knew what they were using. They had a group using control, as in they had a control group using nothing, a placebo group, and a group using Viagra, and a group using Bulbine. And Bulbine natalensis is an African aphrodisiac herb, and that thing increased. That thing was actually shown to outstrip placebo control and Viagra. So it was more if it increased erectile function, it increased perceived libido more than Viagra in double-blind placebo-controlled studies. So it was really cool to see some of these plant compounds like really ranking up there with the pharmaceuticals. It's a really
I love
really
it.
cool
I love it. Like even you would have looked at a lot of the nootropic trials. Alpha GPC is one that comes to mind. Nupept outperformed modafinil in almost every single study where it went up against modafinil. I miss Nupept.
Oh, it's such a good one, man. It's everything that works, except in test boosters. Test boosters is one of the last spaces where things that work aren't banned yet. Yes, I say, because we've got probably another 12 months before it is, but they're cracking down on Tomcat and Shilajit, sadly. But I suppose the big one, like Nupept, is a beautiful one, man. The Russians made that back in, that was one of the first. Of course they did. Everything they made worked. They tested on combat soldiers and stuff. It was so cool. That was the first nootropic, one of the very first nootropics ever built. It was the Ruskies trying to make it back in, I think it was like the 50s. It worked phenomenally well at a tiny dosage. You have like 10 megs of Nupept and you lit up like a Christmas tree. Like it's bloody brilliant. Just
between you and I, I've got a bag of pure Nupept still sitting around that I use a touch of from time to time. But really, really good stuff. It'll be such a shame when my supply runs out. But hey,
everyone sees Universal Supps just closes overnight. just to sign up on the door, just flip around to close. No longer here. But it is one of those, like, that's why I love this category. Like we said right back at the podcast, why did we do this in our brands? They make such meaningful changes when you optimize someone's hormones and get their natural testosterone levels to optimal levels. It's so crucial for overall, the big picture of overall health. And like, some of these compounds are so effective and they do work, like Tomcats, the Shilajits, the Bulbines. So I suppose fenugreek's got some cool data too. Fenugreek, you probably want 500 milligrams of, and it can increase free testosterone, insulin sensitivity, a few other cool things as well. So these are all great compounds to have floating around in your toolkit to try and optimize your natural levels and encourage them to boost back up towards, I suppose, the baseline. And I think the final thing before we wrap this episode up, women and test boosters. We'll probably just touch on who to recommend that, when they can use it, why. Just our last sort of area we cover. So I guess, Stu, where do you start with? Because a lot of girls, a lot of female listeners are going, why would I use a test booster?
Why would I use it? Yeah. So I think that is something that I probably speak to more women about than anything else. And the note is this. Both testosterone and estrogen are present in both men and women, and are both critically important in men and women. So you don't want to have, for a man, you don't want to have no estrogen. And for a woman, you don't want to have no testosterone. Now, despite the fact that we think of testosterone as the male hormone and we think of estrogen as the female hormone, it's just the amounts of those hormones that differ, and in fact we're basically polar opposites. So where women's estrogen is high, ours is low. Where our testosterone is high, women's is low. But it's still a critical hormone, and it still performs the same functions in women as it does for men. Especially when we're looking around the areas of libido, around the areas of ability to metabolize fats. When we're looking at mood regulation, all this stuff.
Yeah, thyroid function too. Testosterone is extremely protective of metabolic capacity, and like I think a lot of women who go through harsh diets or comp prep diets or yo-yo dieting, or just in general try to lose weight over the long term, and have sort of gone yo-yoing with their calories and done binge and restrict cycles, or had periods of time in a calorie deficit. Really, the reason that women's thyroid and women's metabolism, to simplify that further, isn't as robust as men's is because testosterone is so much more stimulatory and protective of thyroid function than estrogen, right? So having optimal testosterone in women, it can be very, very helpful at making them more metabolically robust, because we've all seen women who have maybe done a bikini competition or something, and then after the competition ballooned and put on 10, 20 kilos and could never get it off again, or 2 years later, they're still struggling to return to before their diet weight. And it's because that testosterone is 7 to 10 times more effective at converting T4 in the liver anyway, at the liver site, at helping the conversion of testosterone T4 to T3. So hypothyroidism or slow thyroid function is a big area in itself. We'll probably touch on in another episode. But I suppose the ratio in men and women, one in 3 women are suspected to have some subclinical hypothyroidism, so sort of undetected slow thyroid function. In men, it's 1 in 7. So women, when you're saying, Stu, testosterone, is a really important thing for women. That relationship around that metabolic health is a big part of that picture, and really, really helpful for stimulating that sort of conversion into free thyroid hormone, boosting that metabolic rate.
Yeah.
So it can be a really
And I
good
think
part
the
of that.
thing is, you know, something that women will, the word testosterone scares a lot of women. Like it's a scary word when they come in and I'm recommending a test booster to them. They're like, who is this dude? Like, you know, like, does this guy know what he's on about? You know, like, look at the arms on this guy. Is he really recommending testosterone to me? But I think that the thing to note, and that's really important for girls to realize, is that we are not prescribing testosterone to you. That is not what we're giving you. We're giving you something that is, like we said earlier in this episode, we're giving something that is going to, I guess, tell your body, hey, wake up and start producing this hormone the way that you should. So we want to get your natural testosterone production optimal. We don't want to, you know, we don't have the power to put it beyond optimal. We just don't have the ability to do that. We can't sell you compounds that can do that. That would be an endocrinologist's job. But
fun.
yeah, but the thing is, I think that something that I want to probably answer is, for the girls listening, is how do I know if my testosterone is low? I suppose the simplest answer is get a blood test. But barring that, and this is from, you know, 10 years plus of experience in dealing with women, dealing with women's weight loss, talking to girls, looking at bloods. If you are under about 50 years old, let's say if you're under 50 years old and you're a woman and you have no libido, you probably have low testosterone. Okay. And you can confirm that. You can check, you get some bloods done, because there are other things that can affect libido. But generally speaking, like if you're a girl in her 20s or 30s or even 40s and you have no libido, you probably have low testosterone, because you should have some libido. You should have some sex drive, and testosterone is going to be the hormone that's driving that libido. So that's a really good indicator. If you feel like something's off, like I am just not interested at all, like it is not something that crosses my mind, you probably could do with a little increase in testosterone production.
And estrogen dominance is a big reason for that too. Like in men, the ratio of testosterone to estrogen is almost more important than the individual numbers, right? Like the ratio of test to estrogen is called your androgen ratio. Same in women. If your estrogen's through the roof, well, high estrogen really, you know, results in the binding up in low free testosterone, right? Like high estrogen means high SBG, sex hormone binding globulin. It binds testosterone, so it can bind up that testosterone as well, and also dampen that libido, dampen, I suppose, mood, because we spoke about before, testosterone is on a pendulum with dopamine. So, you know, like a low dopamine is low mood, low motivation, apathy, you know, just all around depression really is a low dopamine state. So if mood's low, motivation's low, libido's low, overall feeling lethargic and unmotivated, that's a common sign. And really important, you mentioned menopause there, and this is where it's great, Stu, having a background of when you know, the bride busters, you know, working long term with massive amounts of female clients, weight loss around the menopausal period as well, really benefit from testosterone boosters.
Huge. Like, so the first thing that I will do is try and get either perimenopausal or menopausal women on some of these compounds that we mentioned in this episode, because they can just help so much. And I'm not just talking about, like, obviously my primary concern was always weight loss, but I'm just talking about like alleviating some of these menopausal symptoms. Like, we've got some stuff that can really, really take the edge off some of these, you know, these hot flushes, these crazy mood swings, you know, these crazy fluctuations in weight, you know, with massive weight gain and all this sort of thing. We can really alleviate some of that with some of these compounds that we spoke about earlier in the episode. So it's something that definitely I look at with either perimenopausal or menopausal women. Super helpful. And, you know, if anyone is interested in knowing more about that and how to identify kind of what's going to be best for you, you guys can always flick, you know, either the podcast page a message, or even Will and I, we're always happy if people reach out to us. You know, we're always happy to help people. That's what we're here for. And it's, you know, it's not to ram products down your throat. Like, I think Will and I both got into this in the first place to really genuinely help people with their health. So if you are ever curious, or you have some questions, or you want to shoot some bloods through to Will or myself, we're always open to that.
Yeah, 1,000%. I always have a look at these areas because it can be particularly like this menopausal period, for example, where estrogen has declined to an extent where it's no longer at therapeutic levels, and we're starting to experience those symptoms of menopause. Then I suppose throwing in a natural test booster will increase androgens. The body will then go, oh wow, there's all these androgens floating around. I need for homeostasis to occur, I need to convert some of those through aromatase to estrogen. So then you've got more hormonal load overall. You've got more estrogen, more androgens. You're feeling better, more vitality. So like these can make big impacts. And same with girls who have come off the pill as well, who've come off the pill recently. That's basically a steroid cycle, but done for 10, 20 years and no one bats an eyelid. People are on, that's hormone replacement therapy. They're taking synthetic progesterone or synthetic estrogen for long periods of time. And I suppose when they stop, they have to do basically a PCT, but no one does one because you've been on, had shut down natural production for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however long you've been on the pill for. And I think a natural test booster can do the same thing there, help kickstart that natural production again. So very, very useful for, women who have had, heavy dieting phases where they've, their period might have stopped. It's called amenorrhea. For girls who have yo-yo
all the time, probably, these girls who are doing like comp girls who listen to our podcast will attest to this. Probably at least half of the girls that I see competing lose their period.
Very common.
And it's just, it's disastrous.
It is, man. So these can be useful for anyone. It can be used for guys who have had, high stress, guys who are younger, guys who are older as well, perimenopausal women who have had, their periods stop or have had from heavy dieting or coming off the pill and contraceptives, guys who have, again, struggled with coming from a weight loss background, have got higher levels of body fat and so on, and struggle with motivation or mood or libido or sleep and stress and depression. All these sort of areas can be somewhere where you can start going, well, these are the symptoms that I want to look at that might lead me towards encouraging, looking at natural testosterone levels and some of those compounds, seeking them out, whether it's, Stu and I, like you mentioned, we're not commercial on this project. This is, if it was, we'd have sponsors, we'd have people paid spots on the podcast, we'd be, receiving income ourselves. We don't. We do this purely outside of our own busy lives where we do generate an income. We do this for free. We do this without sponsorships, without, paid anything. And we never really mention our own brands or even specific products really, because we're not doing it for that. But whether you seek out our products or whether you seek out just individual botanicals with the dosages we've mentioned before there, it's all in this episode. You can go through, write it down, take notes and go away and do your own research and see if this is something that might be useful for you as a therapeutic tool. So that's a great place, I think, that we can call it, mate. That was a wicked episode, I think.
Yeah, good fun. I love chatting about this stuff, Will, and I love really getting to crack into that brain of yours, because there's just so much useful information, not just for the listeners, but for myself also. Every time we speak and we get to delve into that knowledge of yours, I learn a few things as well. So really, really good episode. Well, Will, thanks for putting it together this morning.
I appreciate it, mate. Thank you again. I'm glad we're getting these done nice and regularly. To our listeners, thanks for sticking with us. We are doing them now weekly, or as close to as we can manage with the holiday season, but we're getting these done and we're going to keep going this little mini series we've got going on where we're probably going to go through, the adrenal space, estrogen, all these sort of areas. So if you're interested in this stuff, any of this has been useful, leave us comments, shoot us DMs, share this story as well. Like, again, it's not commercial. We just want to spread the good word. So if you did like this podcast today, jump on your Instagram, share the story, screenshot your podcast, jump on Spotify, give us a review, whatever it is. We'd really appreciate it. So on that note, thanks again. Cheers for listening. Have a good one.